Sup everyone, this is Karak, Kalazian High Commander of the 14th Epoch, and leader of the Karakian army, and I come in peace. Ignore the guns. Those are there in case we get attacked by space birds. Today I bring you the review for Stellaris, and you will listen, human monkeys. Stellaris is made by Paradox, a company known for in-depth simulations titles based mostly on historical figures and locations of the past, such as Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis, or as I like to call them, oh shit, where did the last 10 years go? Stellaris may be different, but it puts the same three-tentacled pod on the pilot stick and aims for the same almost instinctual driving gameplay that created the cult of Paradox. You see, Paradox games have lives not based in a couple years, but almost decades, as even the older titles see consistent fans playing them, waging war with inbred ingrates, holding land ownership over those less fortunate, and murder-marrying families to rule the same 40 acres of dirt for 100-year reigns. Stellaris adds a couple hundred years, a few alien races, and enough options to make a new car salesman swoon. Let's see how Stellaris fared against those other titles, shall we? As always, if you liked the video, maybe subscribe. So here's the review for Stellaris. Races who just love slavery, John Lennon AI, and ship-to-ship combat that looks like feeding time in a celestial fishbowl. Graphics are up first. I can certainly say for the most part, Stellaris looks pretty damn good for a title that will see you looking at fancy Excel spreadsheets and solar systems from zoomed out views the entire time. Let's be honest, it's not going to win any damn awards, but whether you're fighting off a sentient bird race bent on the destruction of everything you and your squid people hold dear, or exploring the murky depths of hot celestial anomalies, the game does a fine job with what it has. A mix of 2D art with 3D overlaid ships, planets, and nebulae. Much of Stellaris is a testament to excellent overall graphics design with a HUD that's also incredibly well functioning and an overall style that delivers information with easy to understand symbols and colors. If I had any complaints, it would be that I was disappointed to see far less variety in ship designs than completely different aliens from other worlds would most likely have created. And there's only one set for each race, so even if you make a new race completely, which is half the fun of the game, you're going to be used carring it through the entire scenario, riding around in secondhand vehicles that one of the primary developer-made races is known for, and hoping no one notices that you stole the space keys. Also, I would have liked far more variation on the racial avatars, because it can quickly start to look a bit like first cousins are doing the double-back beast, and everyone starts looking the same as you play the game for longer periods of time. Of course, that matters less and less on the aliens, because let's be honest, many times you're going to look at them and just say, screw it anyway. I mean, one mushroom looks just like another one, right? And that, my friends, is a comment that starts interstellar war. From the over-galaxy view to the zoomed-in view, I'd say it does pretty well. It's good for what it's trying to do. Sound, music, and voice. And of course, sound is up first. It's not amazing, and most of the sound is beeps and boops when you're choosing activities or canceling them. Ship-to-ship combat sounds okay at best, but it reminds you more of three kids making boom noises than anything that really resembles the bold and beautiful tones of some of the headier space games that have come before this. It lacks a good deal of the low end, and there's this very little variability that sort of goes throughout the entire title, resulting in quick piranha-styled space attacks collapsing into a din of tinny explosions that sort of resolve themselves as everyone flies off to lick, suck, or tentacle, or preen their wounds. Honestly, not that impressive when it comes to sound. And that brings us to music. Mother of God, this is the most amazing music I've heard in a game in so long. Just imagine the most stirring mix of Christopher Nolan ordered up soundtracks, played by warrior poets on instruments that probably look like fists pumping into the air. Half interstellar, half Star Wars theatrical epic. This is one of the most fantastic, epically awesome soundtracks I've heard in years, and fits perfectly with the title. It doesn't matter if it's a dulcet chords playing during an exploratory hiatus as you come up with your next backwards plan to end around another alien's territory. Or maybe it's the first moment you colonize a new solar system and it just so happens to parallel the Blade Runner inspired synth that's moodily reminding you that this planet you're inhabiting is very, very vulnerable and very alone. The music adds an almost palpable atmosphere here. It's incredible. Every single track was awesome. Voice. None. So let's move on. Gameplay. You know, when you think about it, Stellaris starts out like any other boy meets girl story. Boy and girl create massive empire in a bid to rule the galaxy and then forget where the other one is. But even here at the starting, the game is almost duplicitous in its presentation. If you just walked by someone and saw him picking a race or starting the game, you'd think, hey, this looks a bit shallow. Just a little animated avatar of a character, the type of planet the race likes, and some other odds and ends about politics and space travel, and bonuses to various aspects of the game that they provide. But that's like ignoring a friggin' riptide. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Even when first jumping in, it feels the same. You start out being able to have an artificial intelligence walk you through a large swath of the game, or just have them pop up during important moments, or hey, you can turn them off entirely. Trust me, make sure that sucker gives you the full Monty up front. It's absolutely vital because what Stellaris does is shifts focus from the typical 4X kinds of games, just enough to make a difference here. Stellaris has to be one of the most basic and just plain newbie-friendly looking UIs I've ever seen as well, and thank God, because the game is also stunningly deep and surprisingly flexible. Of course, your resources are listed at the top of the HUD, things like energy and minerals for building things, as well as your current level of various technologies and their bonuses. Hover over almost anything in the game and you're going to quickly have an idea, at least, of how you got to that number you're looking at, or at any racial bonuses that may inflict on it. On the right side is a basic status bar that allows you to do most governing without opening additional tabs, which is completely awesome and another level of that accessibility they built in. We've seen it in some other games, but nowhere near the flexibility we see here. In fact, really utilizing that overview is just plain genius, and you can build, explore, and otherwise just from there without going back to whatever solar system your people are in at the time, or your ships, or otherwise. But in Stellaris, it's not always about colonizing or learning new technologies or exploring or rigging elections or murdering other races' leaders. It's about everything. It's about all that. Almost everything you do offers some kind of path towards moving your society and planetary group forward as based on your different politics. For example, though it gives you more influence and force of arms, if you colonize a ton of locations, it can cost an incredible amount of space ducats. And as your systems get more and more spread out, guess what? They become separatists and will not always do the things that you want. In the end, you might wind up dancing like a political space marionette to whatever odd request that group might want to blackmail you with. But let's say you hate aliens, so you decide to keep your race fairly contained at first. You're going to have the costs being lower, but then you're going to have to work everyone harder on the planets you do have, possibly resorting to slavery or other less savory methods to get more from less. But of course, that's only going to work if your race's political beliefs support it. If you decide to just explore and take a middle approach, you can use a situation log to perform missions for bonuses of their own. Maybe take over another planet, subjugate their people, and turn them into little mini-me's. Regardless of which of the ways you start, moving your race forward, you are going to be researching new technologies, and that's when you find out that unlike many space games, the characters themselves not only matter here, they're downright counted on for success. When you research, the game basically grabs 3 technologies from a deck for each scientist you employ in their respective slots. So by moving them or replacing them, you can somewhat adjust what technologies you're going to get in particular categories, and you have a better chance of getting whatever that particular scientist has as a trait. And those really run the range from social sciences or shipbuilding, weapons, biology, or a number of others. Now, since those bonuses can be comboed with other things, speeding up research or jumping on a science vessel and helping them explore strange anomalies, it can be a very real secondary strategy to manage who is doing what. It's not just about finding a good planet, landing some people on them, and throwing them a shovel and asking them for the Great Wall of Planet 34X. And also, the characters just get old and die, just croak, and many seem to sense that the best time to croak is right when you're working on something ultra important. It doesn't matter if they're scientists, admiral-running militaries, or planetary governors, they all succumb to the sweet black sleep at some point, and because they are so important, replacing them with another character who's almost guaranteed to have different skills can be incredibly complex, as suddenly your planet isn't making enough food for your people because this governor thinks fat people are wasteful, but he sure does know how to make a good spaceship. But guess what? He can't do that either because these people are starving to death due to Mr. Weight Watcher, and everything from the ground up has halted, which then results in you trying to rejigger your entire plan and sometimes scrap them completely on that planet, which is absolutely awesome to me because that feels like governing, but I have a feeling some people may not like that kind of impact. Now, there are planet types, each of which have their various ecological types like barren, jungle, or continental, all that need to be researched before terraforming. Each has a number of populations on it, and those can build objects on specific tiles to get supplies like food and much needed energy that is listed on that tile. Now, if you don't have enough food, they stop doing shit. If you have too much food, they hump like space rabbits until they somehow all decide to enact pregnancy laws and level out that planet's maximum. Each planet has tiles that offer up those resources, though you can just bulldozer that shit and build something else. If you want, it almost always equals in a lesser return, however. You can also move workers around, basically using them as a mobile workforce, not attached to that single power plant when the food needs to be harvested in the summer. It's an interesting design that both allows for a deft hand at planetary control, but it can be god-awful complex in the end game. Don't get me wrong, it's not staggeringly difficult or anything. Now, on those planets, you can also build spaceships, and your spaceport governs standing armies and past edicts. Now, edicts are basic, massive planetary laws that give huge bonuses, but burn through your influence at a staggering amount. And influence is sort of like you're a president, you can make some decisions, but only so many. Creating spaceships, like I said, is there, but it's sadly very basic. You pick from particular body types and then throw them together. As you gather new technologies, you can also easily create new ships and upgrade old designs, even on the ships as they are currently in the field. And upgrading and changing around is actually at the core of this gameplay. It's a basic system, though, with nothing really new or exciting to offer. Some ships have one or two large weapon bays, and others may have a number of systems set up that can turn them into defensive juggernauts, but none of it is really new at all. But really, new doesn't equal good. Unfortunately, this also doesn't equal exciting. Now, once you've met another race and go through the steps to understand them, you can fight or engage in a passable diplomacy system, which is in place where you can do the typical trading of items for items and money for political clout. Hell, you can even join other races and alliances or be a vassal race for them, engaging in mutual pacts of assured destruction, and occasionally high-five or high-tentacling one another when good decisions are made. Here's the thing. What Stellaris does that's a bit unique is removing that hard lock of steps after any decision is made that a game usually has. Even alliances feel a little bit looser and more flexible than other games of this kind, and within every aspect here, there's the ability to rub a little bit of yourself up in it and see how your actions affect the decisions you made and the solar systems you run. But as I said, there's also battle. Now, there's a reason why I'm mentioning this last. I'm going to be honest, I'm both impressed and sort of disappointed. It looks like guppies fighting over food pellets, and the strange way in which they circle and fire does nothing to lodge the idea in your head that these are massive ships holding unbelievable power and fusion engine-fueled bellies. Even when you flood the screen with ships, it still looks like a bunch of Shriners showed up and are just driving around in their missile-laden parade go-karts. Now, that being said, combat itself is decided by what you put out into space and what admiral is at the head of the fleet, and not about special skills or clicking on spaceship hurricane kicks. Take that as you will, but this sets up the title for a more thoughtful process, and I loved that myself. I like that feeling of sitting back and saying, you know what, I think I did pretty much the best I could with what I had. Let's see how they do. Instead of watching it like a hawk and clicking icons with fade counters, you see them blast it out, and then someone emerges the winner, and most likely one of the race's science vessels goes and picks up the gold teeth you've knocked out of each other's space grills. It's gonna appeal to some. I can see it absolutely turning others off. Sadly, that's also one of the problems. Once you're of certain strength and size, you sort of run around like Vladimir Putin, just doing whatever you want, and everyone's a bit too terrified to do anything about it. When the game starts, many times AI will try to pick you apart, appreciate your strengths, and whittle away at your weak spots, and not hesitate to go into war. But as you get stronger, there's an almost orderly state-like being that creeps over everyone like friggin' Space Paxel, especially when it comes to you. Or worse yet, they treat you like the fat kid at dodgeball, absolutely annihilating one another in nuclear furnaces the size of small suns, but blatantly pretending you just don't exist. It's odd and sadly decoupling from feeling that you're running a massive star empire. Until, of course, one of the late game moments approaches, or you research one of those rare technologies and set off a possible horrible scenario which alerts ancient races to your growing power. Think the Reapers in Mass Effect 3's in battle, but this time your choice and actions will actually matter. Now, these in-game moments, of which that is just one example, are very cool and help the middle section of the game, which has the ability of growing a bit stale once everyone battles and diplomacy lines are drawn. Despite that, the game is chock full of emergent gameplay. You know, I've run my foes into the ground in 100-year arcs of broken treaties and end-around plans, watching their failed attempts at retaking planets I've subjugated under boot heels. I've even waged war on the peaceful, somewhat-looking bird people with my despot dynasty with its gears of progress greased on the blood of countless slave-driven worlds. And I've failed, crushed under the yoke of aggressive species, locking down access to warp gates and destroying anything that moves. Because that's one of the things this game does, is it encourages role-playing of the actual leader of a space empire. But most of all, I've had a hard time explaining to others how this all happens. It starts out basic enough. You send a science vessel out to survey stuff and a construction vessel out to build items, to gather resources. But then it just sort of explodes. You see, war doesn't mean genocide and peace doesn't mean lack of conflict, and friends are enemies, enemies are sort of pals, and the flexibility here is like mixing church and state a little bit. While it's pretty cool, it can also feel a bit meandering and lost. Additionally, there are some issues for sure. We're going to talk about those now. While I love the HUD and it's still absolutely quick and informative in many ways, there are particular times when you won't really be able to track down what area is causing a problem unless it's a total emergency, because as is the tendency of most space games, you basically can't tell something's wrong until it snaps in half at the worst possible time. In fact, what's awesome at the start of the game is the what you see, what you get information tabs, but in the end, the game can slowly feel a bit inadequate next to the enormity of a spacefaring race that has 3 separate ruling bodies, sector governors trying to run them, and the beginning of differing political ideals. And of course, political ideals are fun, so let's talk about fun factor. This game is really enjoyable. It's also much easier for people who've never played a game like this to get into. If you haven't played a 4X game, Trust me, you can jump into this. Sadly, that ease of functionality has a breaking point. Like the space shuttle at some later moments, just not cut out for much of anything. It's doable, but wow. If you were to step away from a game here in progress for a couple days and return, it would take a good deal of time to even identify what and where you were progressing and what your plans were going to be. Stellaris is a unique title, one part ease of entry, one part Turing test. While it's definitely the easy to learn, difficult to master kind of gameplay genre, I'd personally love to have seen far better looking space battles, a more detailed diplomacy system by far, and even more information than it currently gives, specifically in the way of metered progress, an easier to read, already researched tech tree, and upcoming problems being alerted to you prior to them breaking. But it's absolutely lifted aloft and helped along by wonderfully weird in-game that finally sees a reward for getting there other than a victory screen that counts off the number of genocides you've Hitlered before everyone else just said fuck it or squawk squawk, which probably means roughly the same thing. So as you know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or on a PC title, deep sale, and of course, never touch it rating scale. And this is a buy. It's not without its problems, but it is well worth jumping into whether you are an old grognard like myself or you're somebody who is brand new to the 4X style of gameplay. There is a lot here to be offered to everyone. And Paradox is known for massive numbers of DLC, both free and paid for, so this is a game that will most likely see a large number of improvements and changes, as well as it has a full modding community backing it up. There's already mods on the Steam Workshop. There's also the fact that the multiplayer just works. It's easy, you just sort of jump into it, and it works exactly like the single-player game, except, hey, some of those squids might be replaced by humans of questionable intellect. So I leave you with this, my ode to Stellaris. Here comes Karak and the United Nations of Sup. Want to travel through my systems? Hell, good luck. I got missiles that shoot missiles with antimatter switches. Time to end your race. Peace out, bitches.